Good day, everybody! MangaKamen here, and welcome to my very first commentary! So let's see how well this goes. The video on content today is The Worst Pokemon Episode 1, Pilot by Protomario. Now before I begin, I want to make a few things clear. This is to be a counter to Protomario's opinion, and while I will occasionally joke around in this video, I do not mean any disrespect to the guy. This is meant to be seen as a discussion/critique of his work. And two, I am not a part of the commentary community. One look at my videos will tell you that. Although from what I heard, this video will put me in said category, so YOLO! And with that out of the way, let's begin. Oh, I'm also skipping his opening to save time, but there's one thing I have to point out. How is this a Pokemon theory? I admit this is a nitpick, but it's something I gotta point out.
Hello and welcome back, YouTubers. I'm Protomario, and I wanted to just talk, freely about the worst Pokemon that there are. Now, a lot of people are very specific when they do these lists and things of this nature, but I want to be just real chill about it and just talk freely here, just as if I'm just talking to someone instead of scripting out everything and hitting every point perfectly,
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, there is a reason why people do script these things out and make these kinds of lists so they are tight, to make sure that they sound competent in what they're saying. While this is an opinion piece, the fact that you are in a public forum will allow people to critique and correct any possible mistakes you make, and a script will help you reinforce your points. That's the double-edged sword of putting your opinion out there.
So, I wanted to talk about many of the designs being recycled, rehashed, and just all around being the same or similar Pokemon. Now, I understand that there's only so many types and there's only so many combinations you come up with before you start making similar ones, but nevertheless, that makes many of these Pokemon almost useless, and their stats and move pools don't help.
Okay then, so we got your criteria for why these Pokemon are in the video. So let's see how this goes.
So, let's jump in with Trubbish. Trubbish is a terrible Pokemon.
Can you say, bandwagon?
He rounds out the 3 garbage-type Pokemon, which would be, Grimer, Muck, Coughing, Wheezing, Trubbish, Garbodor. Everyone says Garbodor and Trubbish are garbage because that's pretty much the embodiment of what they are, and they come up with the counterpoint, well, what about Grimer and Muck? Yeah, I get it, but how would you like oil to be drawn?
And how exactly does this make Trubbish bad? You bring up Grimer and Coughing, but you don't elaborate on why it's bad. Also, since the list of worst, we can actually bring in research into this. Looking at their stat totals, Coughing looks to be more defensive. Grimer being bulkier and higher of attack, it's easy to consider Trubbish a more well-rounded Pokemon. And when said Pokemon do evolve, they roughly stay the same. Now, Garbodor does have the least of the base stat total in its final form, which could explain why of these 3 it's the worst choice. But you didn't bring this up in your video, even when you said,
and their stats and move pools don't help.
And even then, Garbodor could be seen as a middle ground between these 3, especially since it has the highest speed of all 3.
Grimer and Coughing were based on the pollution of the time, so it sort of makes sense why they were created in the way that they were created. A giant puffball of smoke and oil. What else do you want to do with that type of Pokemon? Now granted, their evolutions are very, very, very basic. Grimer evolves into a bigger puddle of oil, and Wheezing grows a tumor. There's something to be said about cancer and emphysema there. Don't smoke, kids.
Man, with a line like that, how can I disagree with you? Well, I think I've got a good reason. So, was this just a rant on the Coughing and Grimer lines? How does this explain why Trubbish was bad and why it's on here? Also, like Muck, Grimer, Wheezing, and Coughing, Trubbish here does make sense, since Unova is based off New York City, known for its excess of trash. There's also the point you make later in this video that will come back and bite you on this, since you say only Trubbish is bad and not its evolution.
Farfetch'd is just junk. He's a non-evolving duck Pokemon that's been hunting to extinction because he's tasty. Yeah, okay, so we got ourselves a bird that is more viable as a meal than an actual combatant.
Oh no! A Pokemon exists not for battle! We're doomed! Yes, competitively speaking, Farfetch'd is one of the last things I would use in the team, so I agree with you. Looking at its stats, as a flying-type Pokemon, it is pretty abysmal. In the original games, it can only learn 2 flying-type attacks. And the rest were mostly normal. So competitive-wise, yes, I am in full agreement that Farfetch'd is a terrible Pokemon. However, Farfetch'd still has its uses outside of battle. such as learning 2 HM moves, Fly and Cut. Granted, you can have Charizard and Skarmory learn both HMs, but considering that Skarmory didn't exist in the initial games, and turning your Charizard into an HM slave would be a waste, it would be an optimal choice to use with said HMs.
In the original Red Blue, you could only get this bird by trading him, so he wasn't even a wild Pokemon. And the Pokemon you got was named Ducks, so enjoy that nickname for the entirety of the game.
And that was fixed in Yellow, where he did become a wild Pokemon. In addition, both Jynx and Lickitung were only viable through in-game trades as well. And while you can catch Lickitung and Farfetch'd in Yellow, you can only get Jynx via trades still, and not even in-game. Why make it seem like trading Pokemon in-game is new, when practically every mainstream game there has been a number of trades for hard-to-get Pokemon?
Farfetch'd isn't that great of a Pokemon.
One day we're gonna get that filthy duck! Time for some TL... Wait, the video's still going. Aw, man!
Coming from the people who play Pokemon not wanting to choose Charmander in Red and Blue because the sprite was so horrible to look at from behind, yeah, I kind of understand why people don't like Stunfisk.
Despite the fact that's Charmeleon's back sprite. In addition, remember when you said this?
Designs being recycled, rehashed, and just all around being the same or similar Pokemon. Now, I understand that there's only so many types and there's only so many combinations you come up with before you start making similar ones, but nevertheless, that makes many of these Pokemon almost useless.
Stunfisk is a ground electric type, a pretty unique typing to itself. Not to mention, Stunfisk's design is unique. The only other line that using it would be the Mudkip line. And while there are similarities in design, anyone can tell you that Stunfisk isn't going to rehash.
Sunkern is another weird Pokemon, but I don't really put unevolved Pokemon in this list, because once again, if you want to talk about unevolved Pokemon, you can put all kinds, in this list.
Wait, you say you don't want to put any unevolved Pokemon on the list, yet you start with Trubbish and does not compute?
It's like Hoppip. You could put many of the starters in that list for unevolved, because they're not strong and you wouldn't use them competitively.
Little Cup. A competitive format where players only use Pokemon that have not evolved but are capable of evolving. Usually they stay at the level 5. Your argument is null. Also, if you don't want to put unevolved Pokemon on this, then why do you keep talking about Sunkern and even bring up Trubbish, since it too is an unevolved Pokemon?
Din, there we go.
Not a joke, but an incredible simulation.
Is the Pikachu version of Pikachu for Generation 6. It's not the worst design I've ever seen. Pulse and Minim go into that category, but all of these Pikachu wannabe Pokemon are pretty terrible. I would say that Parishu, and Emolga are the only two other Pokemon that are pretty decent, as in the Pikachu of this version of the game.
What about Peekaboo? I mean Meryl. People can debate that it can be considered as a Pika clone. And Azumarill can be pretty powerful thanks to its typing of Water and Fairy, as well as its ability Huge Power. Yet you lump it in with the bad. Please learn what all means.
No. And as far as Din, Din's alright, but the fact that it doesn't evolve also, and you can get Pikachu in X and Y, kind of makes you say to yourself, well, it's a cute Pokemon, but why would I ever use it, other than to just look at it? And you don't want to send it into battle, look at how cute it is. Send that bad boy against Steelix, or Mega Evolve Steelix. Yeah, you're gonna have a bad time.
Time for Pokemon Battle Strategy! You see, the Den can actually defeat Steelix and Mega Steelix. You just need the right tactics. And it's easy. The Den can learn Grass Knot, a grass-type TM move that's powered based on the weight of the opponent. And since Steelix weighs over 400 kilograms, Mega Steelix at 740, it's going to be hit with the over 120 power. Not to mention, the Den has faster speed, so it will hit first. Now, I know what you're saying. What if Steelix survives the first blow and uses counters like Earthquake? Simple. Just have the Den hold on to the balloon item, which will allow it immune to ground-type attacks, and have your opponent either waste a move missing or having them use another move that will pop the balloon. Granted, there are other factors in this, but it's a viable strategy if the Den would be facing a Steelix.
Shuckle is another strange one. While Shuckle can be used competitively, I can't see anyone having a good time raising this Pokemon. I would really be interested in seeing how quickly it took a level 1 Shuckle to be raised up perfectly for an EV trainer.
Hey, Proto, I don't know if you know this, but there's a thing called super training. Granted, with Shuckle's low attack stat, it would make super training arduous. However, that's why there are the bags, which can allow you to do that without having to actually put it into super training. Just have other Pokemon get the bags, and have it wail on them. You'll have a real contender Shuckle in no time that way.
I mean, it must be murder to raise this Pokemon with how slow it is.
This is worse than that time we were jumped by that garden slug.
Always missing the first hit and being super weak. Man, I thought Chansey took the cake for weakness, but my goodness.
Even though Chansey is used more as a wall and can be evolved into Blissey, which has some of the highest base HP in the game. You don't use it for pure combat. And even then, it can learn Seismic Toss, which has an automatic set amount of damage to it.
Shuckle is just... don't mess with Shuckle. He will fuckle you up. Get it? That's a joke. It's a funny joke.
Oh, you understood that? Not a word.
There are a lot of other Pokemon that I could talk about on this list.
Even though Chansey can evolve into Blissey, and Smoochum is an unevolved Pokemon. And while technically they're not on the list, by putting them in at this point gives the implication that they will be.
I don't want this video to go on too long. Some of these Pokemon are so similar to other Pokemon, or they're just not viable at all to use. Like Farfetch'd or Delibird. You wouldn't use them playing through the game because you wouldn't have the TMs to teach them enough moves to make them viable. You might be able to teach Delibird 1 or 2 moves to make it alright to use, but it's not a good rounded out fighter when there's plenty of other choices. And same with many of these other Pokemon.
Thing is, you're only looking at battle tactics, and even then you don't get a lot of reasons why they're bad. Looking at you, Trubbish. Farfetch'd can have its outside uses, Stunfix has unique typing, and 2 of your Pokemon are unevolved, and you made a point in your Sunkern portion that you didn't want to cover unevolved Pokemon. Also, I'm going to end the video here, since it's basically just him promoting himself and saying he doesn't own the images. So, final thoughts. While there are times in the video I do disagree with you, this is an opinion-based video. And while I wish you would have gone a little more detail into why you didn't like these Pokemon and had scripted out a little bit more, I can understand where you're coming from with these. I have seen worse videos done on this topic. Hell, look at the video by Silohawk that just made stupid jokes not even saying why the Pokemon are bad for most of the listings. All in all, it's not the worst I've seen, but there is room for improvement in it, such as making sure you're tightening up the editing department. I'm looking at you, Charmeleon Backsprite. Once again, this was not meant to be disrespectful to Protomario, but to offer a counterpoint to his arguments. Thank you for watching. MangaKamen out.